Hello, everyone. This is Tijen Genco, Master Certified Coach and Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. You are tuned into Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco. And this is one of the special series that I am doing this year around the importance of credentialing when it comes to coaching. And who can better partner me on this subject other than Meryl Moritz and Francine Campone? They are almost, I would say, foundational members of the ICF. So welcome, Meryl and Francine.
Pleasure
Good
to
to be
be
here.
here.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Excellent to have you both here. So before we start, what would you like our audience to know about you? Let's start with you, Meryl.
So, thank you very much for this nice invitation and pleasure to be with both of you. So, I'm worked my way from being an executive that was burned out to being over time a global leadership coach. And I was doing some training for a period of time and then went to an ICF conference where Julio Alaya, the founder of the Newfield Network, stood up and said, "My dear coaches, let us not reduce coaching to a fad."
Mhm.
And I went, "Ah!" And he caught my attention. And it was soon after that that the credentials started to getting developed, thank goodness. So beyond that training was this metric
Mhm.
to give me a chance to measure myself against, which I thought was really important. I was a professional. I ran a business. I had a profit and loss responsibility. I wasn't going to participate in a fad. And credentialing for me was that, kind of a shining light that said, we're going to do something different. This is a profession and is never going to be in danger of being a fad, despite the fact that I had walked down the street probably minutes before in LA and saw a car dealer that said, "Come in and meet your car coach who will match you with the car of your choice." And a few storefronts later, it was a salon, and it said, "Come in and get your stylist coach." And and then there was a real estate establishment, and they said, "Meet your real estate coach." And suddenly, I thought, "Thank God we're going to do credentials."
Mm,
I'm a
beautiful.
coach educator, a coach supervisor, a mentor. I spent a lot of time out of the country, and that's an exciting place to be because coaching is relevant in every situation across the globe. And so it's wonderful that we have representation across the globe and I get to be part of that.
Yeah. Thank you for being here and thank you for spreading the high quality coaching around the world. Thanks for being here, Meryl. And Francine, what would you like our audience to know about you?
Oh, thank you, Tijen, and it's lovely to be here with you and Meryl. Meryl and I have had many, many conversations over the years, and with you. I am a coach, mentor, supervisor, and educator, and I have credentials in all those fields because it's a personal value system. I could not be anything other than a legitimate professional. And I think the credential is essential for um, reassuring that what I offer is, in fact, verifiable and demonstrable. So that's, I did my doctorate at Columbia University, and you get pretty well situated in, okay, this is serious, and you're going to go through the
Mm,
process, and going through the process is really where the value lies. So yes, it's wonderful to have the credential, it's wonderful to have the doctorate, but going through the process is where I did most of my learning.
Mm.
And so
mm,
I want to, offer that. We sometimes look at the goal and forget, what's the real value here? It's in the process. It's in being in the experience of getting the credential. And so that's where I stand on it. And what I offer to the people I work with as a supervisor, as a mentor, is helping them really look at their values and how their values and what they hold important and dear is reflected in what processes they're willing to undertake to maintain their own quality and excellence.
Mm. What a beautiful way you both get us started right away into the conversation. So, what I'm hearing from Meryl is to really differentiate and distinguish the profession from wildly, at least in English language, wildly used word of coaching. And what does professional coaching entails then? To me, all the other forms, executive life and health and wellness, all falls into professional coaching in a way. And then what you're saying, Francine, is the process in which actually shapes us as a human being to arrive where we're arriving. So that seems to be part of what happens to us as we journey into the credentialing. We can talk more about that. And I'm also wondering, I know what motivated me, but I like to ask you, each of you, that you shared some of the importance, but what motivated you? I mean, you both are highly credentialed. We're only carrying one of them here to sharing with our audience, but what motivated you to become credentialed in coaching? Let's start with you this time, Francine.
You know, it's a funny question because it never occurred to me to not get credentialed. That seemed to me impossible to say I'm this thing, and it's just because I say so. Right? It's counterintuitive in my world, you know, that and the other piece of it is really wanting to be part of a professional community. And I think that the credential is, for me, it was an entree into a professional community, a community of colleagues. You know, I come out of an academic history. I worked in universities for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And part of university ethos is the culture of collegiality, even if we bicker and fight. Your
Yeah.
colleagues are your colleagues. And so I think that the other piece of this is not just for me and an assurance of value to potential clients, but also the recognition of peers and the recognition by peers.
Mm. That's another beautiful aspect. And it makes me think, Francine, that human experience, right? This is a relational planet. We need to relate to a profession, relate to people, to feel that how we're doing and what we're doing. And that's the other aspect you're bringing forward, that if you're alone and practicing without a credential, without that community, how do we even assess and know what we're doing and how we're doing it? That's beautiful. Would you like to say to that more, Meryl? And you're also what motivated you to get into the
So I
credential?
was just, it was just music on the comment you just made, because I, I was already credentialed and I was still really practicing something else besides coaching, to be honest. I was still leaning on my previous discipline, where I've done graduate work and research in the sociology of organizations and systemic change and how that happens and doesn't happen and what happens to the people as a consequence. So for the first 5 years I was coaching, I felt like I was coaching without a license, because I really, even though I had received the only credential they had at the time, which was PCC, I still was leaning on that old thing. And then I was at a conference, and a person who had come out of the same background as I management consulting. Alexander Kaye, in fact, gave a talk about how he struggled in his first 5 years also of coaching, and how he started to track what was working and what wasn't working for the clients. And suddenly I thought, oh, wait, this isn't about expertise. This is about what happens transformatively to the person you're working with. And I got this huge aha moment, and I was horrified that for the last 5 years, people had been suffering under my hand. Now, they may have gotten some value, and I wasn't mean to them, let's put it that way, but I wasn't really working with the power of possibility that coaching unleashes. Because I was always going in with a hypothesis as a researcher, or I was going in with a framework as a consultant, and they didn't stand a chance of getting out alive, just being a regular coachee. And so what Alexander's example, which was for me humility, and I loved that. And then the credential also, first I had to pass like an orals to get out of my coach training program, and that was, as you said, there's the process, Francine, of doing that was so really good. I learned so much, even though I had a chip on my shoulder thinking, if they don't pass me, and I even said that to my coach, I was such a brat. So having the credential to really then reflect after this 5-year mark, it's like, is this the way I'm living? Which is just about when the MCC was coming into play, and I could do the MCC as well. So I'm really grateful that there was something, to curb my pseudo enthusiasm for what I was doing and really keep me within a new discipline as opposed to the old discipline, which was very easy to go back to.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm thinking that certainly gives us a way of reassess and re-understand and measure, but there is also, I think, constant renewal based on the any kind of credentials, right? Requires continuing education, re-evaluation, that there is that refreshment of a process. I remember during one of the International Coaching Federation volunteer work that one of the coaches was saying that they make sure they get their coaching assessed, very seasoned coach, once a year at least, to get a feedback on. And I experienced that when I teach coaching competencies to my students, and when we do evaluation, when we discuss, they challenge me. Why do you think this is developed, and why do you think this is not demonstrated? And that's also in a way refreshing and recognizing and constantly growing in a way. So that makes me think about where I want to take you both next, is that you are very experienced in this and done a lot of work with Coaching Federation as well. And in many capacities as a coach trainer, supervisors, the volunteer for ICF work, what are you noticing when you hear or assess and review that somebody who carries a credential and somebody who doesn't? You want to start us with that, Meryl?
Yeah, so I've been wooing people, professional colleagues around the world, into the credentialing path. That they're very well credentialed in their own fields, and whether they've come in to hear me give a talk or maybe come into a kind of training that I might run, like in Shanghai or Tokyo or someplace. What is important is, and I did the same myself when I was, like I said, in early coaching, there may be some crossover skills. So for example, a consultant has to do a lot of listening. and questioning to understand what is the need and what is the assignment and what is the challenge. A counselor, a therapist, whether in mental health or in, advancement and acceleration, they have to do the same as well. But the coach isn't listening for pathology. The coach is not listening to test a hypothesis. The coach is not listening for that. So it's a listening for. That's different. So if I'm only thinking about my discipline, what I brought up in, I mean, I'm brought up in systems theory. So I can't subject everything to systems, a systems approach. It's not working. I have to be much more broad-minded. And I think that's one of the things is the coaching discipline is its own discipline and it leans on other disciplines, but it's not an end unto itself. It's whatever the client wants that's the end unto itself. And that's the distinction. I think the coaching mindset separates us from other disciplines that do some kind of similar work. It's adjacent to coaching. And I think when I present it that way to people who may be positive psychologists or management consultants in a very rarefied world where they're doing impact investing and things like that, very exciting, purpose-driven stuff, similar to a lot of the values I have, they say, I see what you mean. And then I say, do people really hire you to coach or do you coach? And the difference is, if you are a credential coach, you can be hired to coach and you feel okay about it. And you're not just going to present something off the shelf that you've prepared for everybody and it's not going to be customized to that person. So I think it's a powerful argument, and actually it's to the highest credentialed people that the argument is most compelling.
What a beautiful thing. So capability on focusing and following the client in your view is the main distinction. So what if somebody calls themselves coach and they are not credentials, how do you see the distinction in their way of relating to the client?
Well, I'm sorry, Meryl.
I'll just put this last codicil into my will here. When I think of like my parting shot is simple, it's simply this, is that it's not my method that helps that person advance. It's how well I align with what matters to them on many levels. And yesterday we even talked about almost on a spiritual, energetic level, how I align with that. That's critical. And to be able to trust the process, myself and the client's wisdom, with that incredible 3-ring circus, amazing things happen. And to have real faith in coaching so I don't have to have a formula. I don't have to subject you to my formula.
Yeah, individuation of the client, appreciating that. Beautiful. Thank you, Meryl. And Francine, what would you like to say?
Well, I do want to echo Meryl's emphasis on the coaching mindset and what's the relationship between the coach and client? What's the relational dynamic? What's the power structure that goes on there? I think Meryl said it beautifully. The other thing I see, and in all honesty, I don't have much interaction with non-credentialed coaches on that kind of level, but I think there is a distinction about what's the purpose? What are we doing here? And that people who are credentialed, especially once they're in the PCC, stage, understand that the purpose of coaching is to help that client learn and grow. And that problem solving, action planning, comes out of learning and growth, so that the work they're doing with the client is not driving them to do something, but to be something. And in that being, then figure out how does that being show up.
Yeah, beautiful, right? The significant emphasis then comes into the coaching mindset and how to relate to another human being, how to appreciate another human being. I often say to my students, if you learn to appreciate a masterpiece that is in front of you, competencies will just fall into place. Right? That's almost how it is, the highest degree of human potential. But do you want to say, Meryl?
Yeah, what you just said is so reminiscent of something that we did a number of years ago. And I think, Francine, you were involved in the experiment. So people in the community started asking, what makes 2,500 the number of hours? And so over time, ICF's credentialing body and the assessors, we ran an experiment. And if you had, I think it was between 1,500 and 1,750 hours as opposed to 2,500, you could apply and go through the application process, submit. I think it was recordings at the time, Francine. I don't remember if it was a live event and we talked about it. But I can't remember. I don't remember.
It might have been a recording. I think you're right.
I think it might have been recording. So there were a lot of people, and a percentage of people did pass. But I listened to one exam that was like so profound, and I always include it in my coaching because inside the agreement conversation, this coach showed every competency. The agreement conversation, if you thought about it, if you boxed it, you would say that took, maybe it was a 40-minute session, that took 35 minutes, but showed every competency, including facilitates client growth. And at the end, the client wanted to end early, not go to 45, because he said he wanted to get off and start taking those actions he felt so inspired to take in a conversation that really technically only demonstrated if you were going to be slavish adherent. It was perfect. He definitely got his MCC. On that recording alone, and I believe it was used as a master for a lot of trainings afterwards. The point being is that the competencies don't have to be confining. And the credential is just a milestone. As Francine was talking about before, it's all a journey as you realize the potential of coaching and the potential of yourself to help in that transformative process in partnership with a client. That's so exciting. Let's not dumb it down by saying this is some sort of like an end. This is I think you used the word yesterday, Tijen, maybe a reawakening or awakening. And I think that was good language for it.
And I think, Meryl, what that sparked for me is going back to this mindset that when you and the client are really resonating with each other, you as the coach are coming forth in that moment with what's called for and what that client needs right now. And, when you look at the competencies, that's basically what they're suggesting the coach be able to do, whether it's about the agreement or the action plan or the exploration. It really has to do with that moment of resonance that then, and you can't do that if you're following a formula or using your tool or your magic box.
Yeah. What a gorgeous place to arrive, right? So we are basically are all in alignment about the importance of the credentialing and carrying many credentials. So, but if somebody is still on the fence, that they are trying to make a decision. It's obviously there is cost involved, right, for the credentialing and continuous education, and that we all find the value in it. But what would you like to offer to that sort of a person that is trying to make a decision? Who wants to get us started with that?
You know, there are so many, I'm sorry, Meryl, go ahead.
Oh, you go.
I was going to say there are so many reasons people don't do it. It can be financial, it can be time constraints, it can be not buying into this notion that it's significant, that it's enough because I say it's enough. So I don't know that there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that. My response is, why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you do it?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Francine. And Meryl, what do you want to share?
I think that's a great one. But I'm also struck by the number of people who say, you know, I don't want to be confined by the ICF way of coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could say the same about EMCC or any of the other larger coaching associations in the world,
Yeah.
AC, any of them. But the problem is, if everybody just does their own thing, are we really standing as a profession? Or are we just solo practitioners around the world throwing a few things like pasta at the wall to see if it's al dente or not, and the client suffers? Now, the argument I hear very often is like, well, my clients are very happy. I said, who's not happy when you listen to someone for an hour? They love to be listened to. Everybody, they are so deprived of listening. We have stopped listening to people. So no one's going to complain if you listen to them for an hour or a half an hour even.
Yeah.
Maybe even 10 minutes, they would be happy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's not really the issue. The real issue is, did we stand at this intersection of evolution and possibility with someone who's, you know, or protect the status quo? Did we stand at that intersection? Did we dare to make the leap? Or are we actually, you know, staying within something known to ourselves? You know, I remember when I first started teaching, I was kind of nervous to do demonstrations. I said, why am I nervous about doing demonstrations? You know, like, I need to expose it, and I need to be challenged also. And people challenge you all the time.
Yeah.
When you do a demo. How come you asked 5 closed-ended questions in a row? I said, because the client's making a decision. And that's when you use closed-ended questions. So are you going to do this or are you going to do that? You don't keep exploring when they're ready to make a decision. And I have an answer for that, because guess what? I've heard all of you do this kind of demonstrations. I've heard all of you make the arguments about what does this really look like when you're partnering with them, when you're evoking awareness. And we need to have something that we share if we are a profession. No other profession just has everybody doing everything random.
Yeah.
Either a
Yeah.
profession or it's a hobby. And I'm not doing hobbies.
And if you stay in your comfort zone, you're not serving your clients, you're serving yourself.
Right. Because you're not asking them. They don't want to stay in their comfort zone. They may
Mhm.
try to stay in their comfort zone when you ask them and challenge them. But no, they didn't come to coaching. They're not paying for coaching. Their companies aren't paying for coaching for them to stay where they are.
Yeah.
How dare we do it?
Beautifully said. And I also, you said something significant, right? I hear that a lot. ICF ways, ICF ways. And that's a very big misconception. There is no ICF ways. I mean, the competencies are competencies to elevate human communication. And I often see them as like a grammatical rules. Without them, what are you speaking and who understands you? So, and when you really become proficient in a language, you can break them to write poems. But until then, study the grammatical rules so people can understand you. And so it is.
You're the queen of analogy. Really, you are the queen.
It's a good
I'm
one.
always amazed that there'll be a new analogy come out any minute. This is such a critical point that you just made.
Yeah, thank you.
Because look, if I only stuck with the ICF competencies, I wouldn't have any leadership clients
Mm.
because I have to go beyond that. There's another level of questioning. There's another level of commenting. There's another level of observation that an executive needs to hear from
Mm.
a trusted advisor, whether
Yeah,
I'm advising or I'm coaching,
yeah.
right? Wellness coaching. You just stick with those competencies, that's insufficient. You have to be able to go beyond that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And any virtually any relationship coaching, you have to know a lot more about
Yeah.
what those the different kinds of love may be, the kind of everything. There's such another dimension. So this is, as we call the competency markers, or what we call the minimum eligibility requirements and some other things. It's all minimum. It's all baseline.
Yeah.
So bring more to it. That's fine. But
Hmm.
don't miss the basics. Don't put the person who has a lot of theory to drive the car next to me on the highway. I want
Mhm.
them to have gone through a driver's education program so I know they know how to, observe the laws of the road.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, the competencies are essentially raw material,
Mhm.
and we get to cook and make whatever kind of meal
Another
we
analogy
learn to
making.
make. And the meal is different with every client at every stage of the game.
Yes.
I
Beautiful.
just want to be on the fly on the wall in your coaching sessions, the two of you, with all the beautiful analogies. I'm telling you, it's like so great.
Excellent. Well, I come from a storytelling culture. That's how we have a lot of sayings, and I think that gives me that rich metaphor. I'm sure Francine has a similar experience. So, what I would like, at least this point, to speak to you more about that there was something that inspired you to take part as an author in that Becoming the Credentialing Coach book, and also the other efforts that you put forward in with this passion. What would you like to share about that?
There's a lot of generosity of spirit in the coaching profession, especially if you go through coach training. I remember my coach training, my very first class, they were talking about, or maybe not my first class, my first practice building class, which was, I think, uh, I don't remember what it was called, but the idea was to get 5 new clients in a month. And I said, and so the instructor was talking about a welcome pack. And I said, what's your welcome pack look like? She said, give me your email address, I'll send it to you. I mean, nobody does that in the consulting world. And so suddenly I'm faced with this kind of thing. So the reason I bring that up is that someone, and I don't even remember who, wrote to me and said, would you be interested in participating, being a co-author in this book that Jonathan Passmore is putting together with this woman, Judith Breed? And I said, well, tell me more. So then I wrote to Judith, but I trusted that person to sort of be a matchmaker for me. She thought I would have something to contribute.
Mm.
And I thought it's worth exploring because I've been on the receiving end of so much generosity.
Mhm.
And then I found out I said, I want this to be more international. It's going to be, as we know, a lot of stuff is too US centric, especially ICF oriented. Stuff is still a lot US centric, even though we're in many, many countries. And I said, I'd like to bring a Japanese colleague in. She said, absolutely. Said she was part of the movement that brought coaching to Japan. And so I invited Keiko Hirano, and she was on this team with Dalia Nakar from Israel with us. And that this was an incredible experience for the three of us to work, hash it out, blood, sweat, and tears. But it was, again, community, the spirit of generosity, and to give back freely what was given to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another way of, as Francine brought up in the beginning, right? Their motivations to become credentials, the part of the community, and exchange and receiving and giving. Beautiful. Thank you, Meryl. And Francine, what about you?
Well, there's two reasons. One is Judith Britt is very, very persuasive.
That is an understatement, and Tijen knows.
But actually, I had just I got to know Judith because I was chairing the committee developing the resource guides for the updated competencies for assessors. And Judith asked me to write about the rating scales because we think about the competencies and we think about the behaviors, but the opportunity to write about the rating scales was really an opportunity to share not only my own perspective, but all of the perspectives and learning I had gleaned over the year of many, many, many conversations with my colleagues, both on the updated competency committee and on the resource guide committee, to really help, to some extent, map out, what is the journey? What are the qualitative differences between someone who is just not quite on the edge of professional coaching and someone who's quite competent at it, right? It's not a dividing line. It's almost like, see, now I'm at loss for an analogy.
Spectrum.
You know?
It's a
But well,
spectrum.
no, I mean, there's a river, right? You have to be able to cross that river. And so writing about the rating skills was really writing about the river. That qualitative aspect of who you are as a coach and how you show up. The rating scales are all about how are we seeing the coaching mindset in action, right? And I really wanted to help coaches understand that it's not just that you tick off all the boxes, right? It's the who in addition to the what.
Yeah.
In the credentialing process.
Yeah, that's beautiful, right? I mean, I think that one of the missions of UDIT was to make it clearer to people who are interested in credentialing that get into a little bit of the assessor's mind. I mean, each and every one of us are unique, but there is also standards that we are doing our best to establish for the people that they're wanting to be part of this community or progress within the community. Yeah.
I mean, I think someone who's aspiring to credentialing can look at that chapter and compare how am I showing up in each of these areas and understand maybe where they need to kick it up a notch, as Emerald would say,
Yeah.
So a few of us have been together talking about rethinking the competencies outside of necessarily under the rubric or under the umbrella of ICF, but really to look more universally at them. And two of the people I invited in, it happened through something that we were all doing together, Francine, a while ago when we were sitting, I think it was for the mentor coaching and the supervision competencies, and the focus group was like, we need to think broader, not just what are ICF's competencies, but what's going on in the world already.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
In that conversation, Alen Seiler, who's writing a second book on the client, the impact on the client, and making that a competency somehow, because that's what's missing. And actually, I think it would be even more persuasive to people who are not on the credentialing path calling themselves coaches if that were included. Because one of their arguments is, my clients are getting value. So who's to say? So if the two things were merged, I think it would be extremely vibrant over time, and that it would be a challenge to collect that information in a meaningful way. That said, we do have research people inside our community who could
Yes.
contribute. And I think Elaine's done a lot of work on that and has presented at least 2 conferences, maybe 3 that I know of. And is going to present tomorrow also in ICF Switzerland on their Summit on Systemic Coaching. So I am very keen to hear more about the future of that possibility, because I think that's the next frontier. Don't be shy about that. We need to find that out, because that then comes back to what organizations have been asking of coaches for a while. We want to see the return on expectation that we said at the beginning. We want to see the return on investment, but not just them. They're the ones who insist on it, but I think the rest of the world needs it as well. It's proof positive that this can work then. It's not just coaches assessing other coaches. This is clients saying what the impact is.
Yeah. You wanted to add something else to that, Francine?
Well, I actually got my supervision credential through Apex, and it's a very European-oriented process that that really was possibly, after my dissertation, one of the most profound reflective learning processes I had to engage in. And I think that when we think about next credentials, not this one, but the next one, that personally, I would love to see more reflection and almost critical self-reflection involved in the assessment process. You know.
Yeah, that's lovely. You know, that this is we know the notion that the client cannot be the right assessor of the session, how the session went, right? Especially if they are people pleasers, they're going to say, oh, that was great and whatnot. How do you measure the real value eventually in human change? And the self-reflective process of that is, we were talking about that yesterday, becoming aware of the awareness, right? How did I change? How did I touching their life? What happened to them? What happened to me? How did we both change? And all that seems to be, we're talking about the next level in the progression of this beautiful profession. So as we are bringing
One thing
yes,
about the book,
of course.
I just realized I should say this. So when I don't remember, again, you get a lot of comments and you don't know who said it. Somebody said when the book galleys were presented to them, they said, oh, this is the who's who of coaching. First of all, that was very nice to be included in the who's who of coaching. But, you know, it's so nice to know that all of us were applying ourselves to the competencies with that kind of rigor. And, you know, bless the trust and intimacy team that really set the template forward for us. And Sherry and Michael, I mean, that was a really wonderful thing to look at, even though I was like, oh, are you kidding? We have to rewrite the damn approach now. But to be in this, you know, sort of like this curious cross-examination of the work that we're always doing and looking at it from a place of neutrality was really a great challenge, a really great big growth opportunity, Tijen, for talking about coach growth. And if credentialing is emblematic of it, it's certainly emblematic of the coaching, the way you deliver coaching. It's not necessarily emblematic of how you grow as a human being, but there is some intersection for sure. So
yeah, Beautifully said. So I'm wondering that as we bring this to close, what, if anything, you wish to further say in this subject of credentialing?
I would encourage people to not think of the credential as another thing to own, but as a way of growing themselves in their profession and in their lives.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Francine. Meryl?
So I think it's as a rite of passage. So we
Yeah.
ritualize a lot of things in life to, in terms of human development. So different cultures recognize different ages when something should be memorialized and something special should happen. And I'm wondering if we think about this as a rite of passage from moving from using these skills or, it's helping your friends and helping your kids or your neighbors to actually, stepping back and seeing this as value. But beyond that, now, like, what can I do with that innate skill of mine? Because I believe no one is brought to coaching who doesn't have some innate talent in this area. And very few people lack it entirely. So, but I think rite of passage. And if we think of the credential as a ritual, as opposed to an end, what will be the next ritual? Maybe it'll be a credential, maybe it won't be. Maybe it'll be something else. Maybe it'll be like when someone said to me, "Would you like to do business in China?" And I said, "All right, sure." And and then she asked me again 6 months later, and then she sent me a contract, and I went for 10 years, and I fell in love and changed who I am. So it's that, what is the rite of passage that we need to embrace? Shall we not just cast it aside because it doesn't fit somehow in our lexicon, but how about using that wonderful skill of a coach to reframe it and look at it and say, what am I discarding? What am I being contemptuous about when maybe I should explore it further? What could be the obstacle for me, as Francine said before, why not do this?
Beautiful. You know what made me think of when you were sharing that, Meryl? When I was in corporate world, year after year, I would receive in my feedback from very different people that how inspiring I was. I would appreciate that feedback, but I didn't know what to do with it until I became a coach. And the competencies and credentialing process helped me really potentialize what was embedded in me and help me self-express too, and to put better use of that gift that was given to me so that I know how to potentialize that human aspect of me. So so that I think is a good way to maybe inspire others to help them to figure out. So what else that you would like to share with our audience about your offerings or the way they wish to, if they're interested, reach out to you? Let's start with you, Francine. How would you?
I offer coaching supervision. I think of my work as being a thought provocateur. Right? And I really am, at this old age, committed to the cultivation of the next generation of professionals so that the field and profession continues to evolve. Right? So I'm happy to talk to anyone interested in exploring supervision, which I know is a word that, particularly in the US, we don't like. But trust me, I will never tell you what to do. I may poke what you think you should do, but I'll never tell you what you should do. So I'm available at Francine at francinecampone.com. And would look forward to hearing anyone. I'm also currently involved in a couple of studies. One is a research project on ethics, and I really enjoy talking to groups of coaches about thinking about ethics and ethical thinking, ethical maturity, ethical judgment. So if you have a chapter that needs a speaker, reach out. The other project is a book chapter on coach education and thinking of coach education as an alchemical process. So I'm in a Jungian phase. That's
What a beautiful thing. Yeah, we will include those in the show notes, the links. Thank you.
thank you.
Francine. Yeah. And Meryl, what would you like to share?
So I guess two things. I'm also a coach supervisor. I tend to work primarily with people who work in organizations. I also do supervision of executives. After we've done a round of coaching, the part that they often like the most is the reflective space. And so I brought supervision into corporations where I'm not supervising coaches, but rather senior leaders and the way they are operating as senior leaders. So that's really kind of fun. I also mentor coach people who are seeking their credentials, but they're always people who are also executive coaches, because that's what I understand the best. And I'm also if this is something you come across, I mentor purpose-driven startups. I'm an exponential innovator certified by a group called Purpose Alliance out of Spain. And we work with people who want to have 10x impact on the world in powerful ways. And so if you know about those kind of people, you can also reach me at merylmoritzresources.com.
Beautiful offerings. And we will also include that in our show notes. So thank you so much, Francine and Meryl, for being here, sharing your wisdom, and hopefully helpful information we produced for those of you who are credentialed, looking for upgrading the credentials, or credentialed, thinking about whether to keep them or not. Is it worth for investment for you? Or not credentialed, or maybe having a different credential than International Coaching Federation ones, and interested in that. Hopefully you'll find this content helpful. And if you missed it at the beginning, this is Coaching with Mastery and Elegance with Tijen Genco, an original podcast from Genco Coaching. If you like what you heard, please consider subscribing to us and leave us a feedback. We appreciate all that, people who do. So thank you again for being with us. Thank you, Meryl. Thank you, Francine.
Pleasure to speak to both of you. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you, Tijen.